All right, welcome back, everybody. So I'm happy to have Stefan Santis from Envirolak on to talk about their coatings. This was one I talked about a couple weeks ago about kind of connecting with him on LinkedIn, and they sent me some product, and I finally got around to testing it. And I have to say that of all the water base I've shot, which is a lot, I was very impressed with the chemical resistance, and kind of their goal from what he's talked about was to try to create a conversion varnish like water base, which is what I've been searching for forever. And 1K, and I feel like you guys did a great job. So welcome aboard. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having us here, Eric. We're happy to be a part of your program. And yeah, water base is something that we focus heavily on. It's all we do.
Awesome. I think that enables you to stay more focused. Before we get into everything, will you give us a little bit of background, kind of where you've been in the industry and just kind of how Envirolak kind of became?
Sure. So I started out in the sanding industry. I've been supplying abrasives and wide belts and discs and sheets and sanding solutions to woodworking accounts since 1991. And all through the years, I constantly had coatings companies calling me up and saying, can you come over here with us and help us fix this sanding issue so our coatings will work better? So after quite a long time of doing that, I decided maybe I should start offering coatings myself. So we got into the coating business ourselves, and we started out by importing Italian 2K products, similar to a lot of the ones you talk about. And we pushed hard with that for many years, and after many years of efforts with limited success, and limited success was due to cost was one of them. Product was very, very expensive, and pretty much all of their products required catalyst one way or another, either
Right.
polystyrene or an isocyanate. Mm-hmm. And without them, they didn't have any chemical resistance, and even with them, they still weren't very good. Water would swell, things like Windex would swell, so they just didn't have the type of properties we were looking for. So I hired a chemist and said, hey, we got to figure this out on our own. There's got to be a better way. So spent about, I want to say, 6 to 7 years of R&D, testing different types of resins and additive packages and many, many, many resins, and finally came out with our first line, which is the one that you did your chemical tests on, which was the 1000 series, which you tested in the 20 sheen on oak. Mm-hmm. So that was the first product we released, and then, started with a clear and gave it to a few customers, and they loved it, and then they wanted primers, and they wanted whites, and then they wanted non-yellowing clears, and it just evolved from there.
Yeah. So while you're talking about that, so why don't you tell everyone kind of like your product line? You guys sent me, I have the high solids white primer, which I was really impressed with because, one of the issues, and is MDF. We all have to deal with MDF now. And you're dealing a lot of times with that combination. It's not all straight MDF where you have wood and MDF. And it's just a real problem because a lot of times, a lot of these water-based coatings just like puff those fibers up and it goes crazy. And you have to do, 5 coats before you get it built up enough to get it beyond that. And then you've got way too much on, if you're using a hard maple or something like that on those surfaces. So, once you talk a little bit about those products, let's see, I have that one, and then the top coat, which is the 2020.
Yeah, okay. So one of the main goal when we developed that primer was to come up with a product that had good filling properties, easy sanding, and most importantly, good sealing properties, specifically for MDF. As what we had found with other coatings is that you'd put 2 coats of primer down, you'd sand in between, you put your top coat on, and your top coat would re-wet the whole package and get right back down to the MDF, and then the MDF fibers swelled up through all 3 coats. Yep. So that you'd have to sand it, put on, at the very least, a second top coat, and hopefully you had no MDF swelling anymore, you didn't burn through anywhere in the whole process, and you were good. So we were real happy with the development on the 170. The resin that we used in it was very suited for the application from a sealing perspective and water blocking perspective. And then we played around to get the percentage of solids up and the flow and the level and the sanding. So the thing I like the most about that product is you can put down one coat, put another coat on top of it without sanding it, give it a good sand with 320 grit, level it out, put one top coat on it, and you don't have any re-wetting of the substrate below, so you don't have any fiber sticking up, popping up from the MDF. Yeah. You can put a second top coat on if you choose to, but you don't normally have to. So it's typically a 3-coat system with one sanding step, which people like because it's quick.
Yeah. Time is money, and that's one of the things with water-based that's always been a struggle is maybe can you talk a little bit about this? So what ends up happening a lot of times with water-based is the opacity issues. What are you guys doing kind of to deal with that? So like, for instance, you may put a primer down and you have maybe your primer is not tinted, and then you put a white top coat on top of that and it's like completely transparent.
Well, when we formulate any of our top coats, there is a specific hiding property that we're looking for at 4 wet mills typically. So we would develop the products with a specific amount of hiding right out of the can. And then when you tint, we generally encourage you to tint your products, making a different color, do 5% pigment load, and you should have full hiding every time.
Great.
At 4 wet mills.
Nice. So that is key, though, putting on the 4 wet mills.
Usually we get full hiding at 3, but we tell people to go to 4 or even 5 if they want to.
Yeah. I like it heavier, better. Heavier seems to be better with water-based. Has that been your all's experience, like when you put it on?
To a point. To a point. You can go heavier. Like most of our products, you can go up to 6 wet mills without any issues. Once you get too heavy, you might run into getting the little scenarios where you got like a fat lip around the perimeter of a panel.
Yeah.
Or you might run into some bridging sometimes if you're not careful inside of shaker panel doors. But in general, we go to 6. We don't have any of those issues. No bridging, no sags, no runs, no fat lips, no mud cracking as a result of a thick fat lip around the edge of a panel.
Yep. I've seen that too.
The other thing we're happy that we get away with is exposing our product to significant heat right away. So with curing standpoint, if you're just putting a product on a rack in a room with a bit of air movement, that's one thing that's really forgiving. It dries slowly and gently, and you should never have problems like that. But a lot of people these days are trying to force cure product and get it done quick. So with these IRs and hot air tunnels and catalytic gas-fired heaters, we actually have one of those systems in our R&D facility. So we hammer it with heat a lot very often to try to push the limits of the coating's curability.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that because I went down and visited Prime Heat down in San Diego, California, and that's one of the things that Herb talked about down there was that a lot of coatings, like it kills you with the travel time, like if you're going into an oven, because you can't hit it with heat right on because you'll mud crack it. So what you're saying is that you're able to hit yours pretty quickly and not have those issues. So you're going to get a faster, production time out of it.
Yeah, that's correct. In general, we don't need to have any flash off at all. We can go wet off the gun right into curing.
Awesome.
With your typical solvent-based products, usually they need a flash off period. And like that, if you don't let them flash off for 2 to 10 minutes, then you get a bunch of mud cracking and solid pop, that kind of stuff.
And I mean, a lot of water-based is like that too. A lot of people, they don't know because they're not doing that stuff, but that is something to consider. So that's pretty awesome. I'm glad that you brought that up. So getting back to the product line. So basically.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the stains. We've got 3 different stain bases that we offer. One is a spray and wipe stain base. These are all clear like water when you get them, and you can tint them either using water-soluble dyes, or you can also use pigments, same pigments that we make solid colors out of. Or you can make a combination of the two, depending on the color you're trying to get, the amount of strength you're looking for, how much grain you want to see or don't want to see. So there's the wiping stain base that can be wiped on and wiped off. It can be sprayed on and wiped off. And then there is a spray stain base, which you spray it on and leave it. You don't touch it. More common for, again, reciprocating lines where they're doing automatic spraying and they're putting on a coat of stain, not touching it, going straight to the next step of sealing. And then the dipping stain, which I told you about. Then to go on top of all three different stain systems, we've got our 100 series clear, which is what we call our warm clear, which again is that product that's got a little bit of amber pop to it. It's most similar to a solvent base, pre-cat or post-cat lacquer or conversion varnish, brings out the golden hue of the wood. That product is typically used as a self-sealer, so you just put 2 coats of that on, or 3 coats, depending on what build you're looking for. Beautiful finish, excellent pore wetting abilities, as you've seen in your tests that you've done. From the 100 series in the amber, we have the 300 series crystal clear that we talked about a little bit. Crystal clear being water white. You can put it over top of white again, and it doesn't change the color. It's got 0 amber out of the can, and it's got 0 amber with age as well. Then we've got our acrylic line, which we don't sell a lot of it because most people like our polys better. But our acrylic line is our 500 series, and it's a clear acrylic system as well. There's a sealer, and then there's a top coat, and then there's the 550 series, which is the high sag version, where you've got the 8 to 10 wet mill sealer and top coat package. Then in our solid colors are typically made out of our 200 series, which is our white base, or our 300 series crystal clear tinted to a dark color. Then after all of the top coats, we get into some special effects stuff like dry glazes and metallics and pearlescence and those kind of things. And we also do a UV right now. We're doing a clear UV at the moment and working away on trying to master the art that everyone's trying to master, which is UV solid color system that is easy to tint and easy to do multiple colors with, which it's not right now. It's very it's a tricky one, but us along with the others are all working hard on it to try to dial something in that's going to be viable for everybody.
Gotcha. Very cool. Awesome. Now you also have, and I have that panel here. You have a really awesome 3 sheen product. And it's a 1K. Now I have not seen one that basically flows out and looks that nice. A lot of times those products, Envirolak has one, and they tend to have a chalky feel to them, and I don't see that with your guys' coating. And most of them are 2 components. Now I've kind of scratched around. I haven't done a full blown test, but it looks pretty promising. Why don't you talk a little bit about that product?
Okay, so that's our 300 series, which is what we call our crystal clear clear top coat. We make that product in a 3 sheen, a 5 sheen, a 10, a 20, a 30, and we also make it in a 90. So we can make any sheen you want out of that product. But it's crystal clear, so it's non-yellowing whatsoever. You can put that product over top of white, and it's not going to change your color. It's ideally suited for applications where non-yellowing is a must. And again, it's one component, as is basically all of our products right now. We tried very, very hard to get the chemical resistance and the performance out of the products without having to add polyaziridines and isocyanates to them. So everything in our line right now is 1K. You can add some of that stuff to it, but it's got very limited impact on the improvement that it makes. Yeah. We tried to get as tough as we could without it from the get.
And I've talked to other companies. That's something that's been a huge confusion with water bases. A lot of these products, like Malaysia and Ilva and Renner, they're not really technically true 2-component water-based products. They're like a mono bicomponent, and basically all you're doing is adding, either the polyaziridine or some type of hardener to cross-link the film, tighter. And there's really no, from what I understand, mathematical ratios to a lot of those on what you actually get out, and you have to kind of test the percentages to kind of figure out what actually, what benefit you're going to get from them.
Yeah, that's always been the case with the Italian stuff that I played with as well. They never give you a straight up, use this percentage and you expect this result. They just tell you to try different scenarios, try different amounts.
Yeah.
Anywhere from 1 to 10% with an isocyanate, or in some cases up to 30.
Yeah.
But then you run pot life issues. You've got 3
Right.
hours to use it, and if you don't use it, you're throwing it out, or you're paying to throw it out. And that's something we wanted to eliminate. Especially, we run a lot of product on finishing lines, so reciprocating sprayers. They don't want to run the risk of curing up product in their line and blocking up circuits and stuff like that. So one component is much more appealing for them. A lot of those guys won't even try a 2K.
Yeah. When we were talking a couple of weeks ago about, messing with some of those products and, trying to run material heaters and having problems with that because it accelerates the dry time too. I mean, I'm a huge fan of if I can go with a single component, I'll be like it. And I've recently talked to some friends of mine and, a lot of people have been concerned about the isocyanates in the water base and haven't really talked as much about the polyaziridine, but it can be just as nasty. I've got a couple friends that are like just deathly allergic to this stuff.
Yeah, I find the polyaziridine probably worse for the user than the isocyanates. That stuff, if you rub it in your eyes, it could cause blindness, for example. And as you mentioned, most people end up with some kind of respiratory reaction to it. I've used it in the past. My eyes start watering, my nose starts running, and I don't have a good night's sleep that night after using that stuff. So
yeah,
we again, we stay away from all those nasty chemicals to try to keep it as clean and green and healthy for you who's spraying it, or the end user spraying it, and of course for the end user in their home, that there's nothing, no formaldehydes or any nasty solvents off gassing into the air and the environment.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about, I know a lot of people are asking, where can they get your products? So let's just talk a little bit about, your distribution channels currently. Do you have some places that can at least ship for people that want to buy and have it shipped here in the United States? Because we didn't really talk about that, but you guys are a Canadian-based company, correct?
That's correct, yes. We're based out of Mississauga, Ontario, which is basically right beside Toronto, Ontario. So as far as distributors at the moment, we're constantly looking for new partners. But at present, we have down in the States, we have a company called E.B. Bradley, and they have distribution points basically all the way up and down the west coast of the U.S. They've got locations in California and Washington and Oregon and all the way up and down the west. So if any of your people are looking for product anywhere in those areas, E.B. Bradley would be a great company to contact. They have inventory, they have tinting abilities, they can do color matching. They also service Las Vegas, but that's it for the West Coast. We're working with some other large nationals. We'll see if anything ever pans out with them, because those are big undertakings. But if we get one of those 2 large nationals on board, then product will be available a lot easier in a lot more locations.
Sure.
However, what we do encourage people to do is, reach out to us. We can ship your product directly from here very easily.
Okay.
And once we do, we're generally hunting for distributors in their area anyway. And if we have somebody who's looking for our product, they tested it, they've tried it, it makes it a little easier for me to try to find a distribution partner in their area. At least I can tell them, we've got people interested in your area and buying the product. So we're not going to leave all the work on you to go out and sell it. We're going to try and funnel some business towards you.
Sure.
We also have, from a distribution standpoint, we've been working with the folks at Richelieu, and they have many, many locations all across Canada and the eastern seaboard of the U.S., including Chicago and some of the central areas. They're slowly but surely getting the product into one location at a time that has people delegated to selling coatings and tinting abilities. And they're slowly going location by location to see that the product has a market in that area, and slowly but surely opening it up to more and more of their locations. But it's a slow process.
Yeah.
So right now, they're just distributing the product here in Canada, but I keep pushing them to try to getting it down in the U.S. before we have to go find another partner somewhere, because at the end of the day, we need it available to anybody who's looking for it.
Absolutely. So now talk about, because I have a lot of Canadian guys that follow me, and where can they get your product in the Canada area?
Well, right now in Canada, if you're in Mississauga or anywhere in Ontario, we've got a distributor in Eastern Ontario named Airfast. So they're stocking the full line. They have tinting and everything going on there, local sales support. Anything outside of the Ottawa slash Eastern Ontario provinces, you would come directly to us at this point, and we would supply the product directly to anybody else from here. And rest of Canada, again, we're working with Richelieu in New Brunswick, and Calgary, and Vancouver, and we're slowly trying to get it branched out throughout all Western Canada, and that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Cool, great, awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the viscosity of your coating. So that's one thing I noticed pretty quickly when I got it. I was like, wow, this is pretty heavy viscosity. So let's talk about equipment and what you guys are finding the best. But before I do that, I do want to go back and ask you one question. So the E.B. Bradleys that are up and down the West Coast, will any of those ship? Because I want to make sure that after this that I get in touch with them or somehow, or people that are interested in buying the product, that, because there are people on, I buy stuff from everywhere all the time. So will any of those ship out?
Yeah, they could ship anywhere you want, I'm sure.
Okay, great.
I can put you in touch with them directly with their coatings product manager, and you guys can have a chat together.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'll be awesome. Let's do that. All right. So if you guys want to get the product in the U.S., I'm going to talk to this distributor, and we'll get something set up. And I'll probably do a whole separate video on it as I'm, going back through some of these coatings that they have. And one of them that we didn't talk about that a lot of the Canadian guys have brought up, and then we'll get back to the equipment. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit. But you have a chair coating that you can put on it, like I think it's like 10 wet mills and it not sag.
Yes, I should probably give you a quick rundown of the line, but speaking of the chair coating, yeah, you can put on, we've developed a dipping stain for chairs. So for doing your color, rather than wiping it on or spraying and wiping, which takes time, we created a dipping base formula for stains. You just add your tint to it to whatever color you want. And you can literally cut a drum in half, roll a chair in that, let it drip dry. All the excess stain will drip off and run off, and it blends in nicely. So there's no wiping involved. It takes 2 seconds to do a whole chair. Or the other option is you can just pour that stain over top of the chair parts and have the excess land in a container where you just re-scoop it back up. Or you could recirculate it. You could create a shower coating line if you wanted to, where you got sprinklers at the top hitting the part, and all the excess runs off into a capture tray at the bottom and just recirculates back up through a pump. After putting your stain on, we've developed that sealer that you're talking about, high sag chair sealer, we call it. Now that product is actually acrylic based, but you can put 8 to 10 wet mils of that stuff on, have no sags or runs. It dries extremely fast, like an hour air dry. If you use some curing technology, it's way quicker.
Sure.
And it sands extremely well. And then to go on top of it, we've got the same kind of product in a top coat. So again, you can put on 8 to 10 wet mils, no runs, no sags, and it's typically it's a 3-step process: stain, sealer, scuff, top coat.
All right, so let's talk about what you guys recommend equipment wise. Now, I shot both with air assisted, airless, and then I also did airless and had pretty good results with both of those. But I want to hear your take on, because the viscosity is very heavy. It seems like this would be a difficult material to shoot out of a conventional type setup. It looks like it's more designed for some type of pump system.
Yeah. So with our development, we try to develop the products to lend themselves well to air-assisted airless. And the simple reason is that almost all the major factories you go to are using air-assisted airless pumps for delivering their fluid. So we designed the product to work there first, and generally, if it works there, it works airlessly beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to do. The biggest challenge people have is when they're using a little gravity cup gun. When you get into some of our products that have 2,000 centipoid viscosity out of the can, you're like, I put 10% water, it's just not enough.
Right.
So for that reason, we have developed a special reducer, which I can send you some to try out. But this reducer that we came up with, it'll cut the viscosity about 5 times more than water alone will. So you can put 5% of that reducer into our thickest product, spray it through a cup gun without issue.
Awesome.
And since you're only reduced 5%, you're not jeopardizing hiding and that kind of thing.
Right. Now, does that affect vertical hang at all?
Not really. Not
Okay.
really. It doesn't make a huge difference on the vertical hang. You'd have to test to see your limits on that, how far you can go with it, but you should still be quite easy to put on 5, 6 wet mills without getting sags.
Okay, great. Because there's some products out there that I found that you go over 5% and it just, like a lot of the Italian codes, it obliterates the vertical hang. It's kind of interesting. I'm fascinated by how, all these different companies formulate differently. It's very interesting, but that's good. Cause I did have some guys that asked me, it's like, hey, I know you said it was thick. And then I also want to kind of circle back around for a minute with the air assisted airless. Cause I just want to make a point that, as I have the last year shot a lot of stuff in air assisted airless, and you're so on the money. If you can shoot water base out of air assisted airless, then it pretty much works across the board. But that seems to be the one that is like the hang up for a lot of water based coatings for whatever reason. Do you want to discuss a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. You're correct in what you're saying. That's where the hang-ups would be if they are there. Generally, you spray through a cup gun, you get so much atomizing air, you don't generally trap any air bubbles or have issues. So it's easy to see. Easy to see good results, I should say, with a cup gun.
Yeah.
With the air-assisted airless, introducing air into the product, you need to formulate the product so that the air gets out of the product, doesn't get trapped in it. So that's somewhere where we've worked very, very hard. Typically, I would recommend 600 fluid pounds and about 20 to 25 atomizing air with a trigger pull, and you should be good. If you had a little bit of air entrapment, generally with our products, add 5% water to them, and it gets away. It goes away on you. So that's where we try to make it easy to use, and we've been pretty successful in doing so.
Now, I know most of your guys are using Kremlins, and I had an interesting discussion that I'm going to take a look at a little bit further, but it was discussed that some of the issues possibly with air assisted airless and water based could be the way that the gun is introducing the air, because we know that the ones on the market kind of do it a little bit differently. Some of them put it in front of the fluid stream, and some of them put it on the back side of the fluid stream. So it's something I want to kind of look at and see. I've got a project that I'm working on actually with Wagner coming up, and they're very interested in the whole air assisted airless and water based versus airless and those sorts of things with some of their customers. And so have you seen any difference with different types of guns on the market?
I haven't studied the other guns from a perspective of where the air is being injected for atomization, but back to what seems to work best with the air assisted airless would be higher fluid pressure and a smaller step. So you're really trying to get hydraulic pressure to do most of your atomizing for you and keep your air down, keep it lower,
Yes.
20 and a bit. You get better transfer efficiency that way. You have less clogging of the tip because there's not so much air hitting the paint at the tip. But in answer to your question about where the air introduction is, I have to look into that a little bit further.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm glad you are the first person that has actually said smaller tip sizes. All these guys that are out here that come from the solvent world, they're like, no, you need a giant tip. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work. Trust me, I've tried it. But what we're finding is the guys out in the field that are using it and that we're kind of like trying to figure this stuff out. And a lot of it is because we don't have access to companies like you that are focused on water-based. So I want to make that a point and are actually legitimately spraying this stuff every day. It's like you get a rep that sprays a 3x5 card and goes, it was perfect. We never had any issues. And I'm like, come on, man. You got to shoot more than a 3x5 card in a demo in a shop once every couple of weeks, to really understand what's going on with this stuff. So I'm so thankful that you mentioned that, because I think that is a great piece of information. So on that, what tips are you finding tend to work best? I kind of range between like 09 and 13 kind of maxing out. What is your thoughts on that?
So generally, let's talk about, I'm going to break this into hand spraying versus reciprocator.
Okay.
If I'm hand spraying, we can lay down all of our products with an 09. If you want a little more control and forgiveness, go down to an 06. I use 06 for everything, and I use 09 for everything. But I don't go to 12s when I do hand spraying. Simple reason is I'll have to lower my fluid pressure so much that I'm losing my hydraulic atomization at that point.
Yeah. Yep.
When we go to a reciprocating machine, where you're feeding 4 guns off of 1 pump, we typically run our primers with a 12 without any problems. That's no problem. You can run the top coats with 12 tips as well. However, we generally get a customer to drop down to a 9 when he's doing all his top coats on a recip. Once again, it allows you to hike up your fluid pressure, get better atomization. You don't have to use a ton of air and make a big cloud and lose transfer efficiency that way.
Right. Absolutely. Great. Perfect. All right. Well, I think that'll pretty much wrap us up.
As you've already mentioned, we only do water-based, so we don't get sidetracked with the world of solvent. People ask me to do solvent all the time, and I don't want to do it. I've lived around solvent. I don't want to breathe it and see it. So we're sticking with water. It keeps us focused on water. It keeps all our development on water, and we're going to continue to bring out more and more products in the Envirolak line and increase our distribution representation out in the market, and hope to get more and more people on board with it.
Awesome. And before we close out, I do want to go back because I got sidetracked, but your stain system. So this is something that a lot of guys like with the Italian systems, and it sounds like it's very similar. Is that base a binder, and then you can add as much binder as you want to control opacity? I mean, I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, but also like if you're dealing with blotchy woods like maple, the more base you put in your dye, how does that affect that?
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually. With stuff like maple and cherry and birch, where you tend to get different absorption rates of the stain into the wood, I encourage you to take our wiping stain base as is, cut it 50-50 with water, and pre-treat the surface with it as a wood conditioner.
Okay.
You literally spray it on the raw wood and wipe it off, then apply your stain. What you'll find is that it makes the penetration level much more even throughout the surface of the wood, and you get a lot less blotching as a result of it.
Right. Yeah, because basically at that point you're putting a binder sort of on the surface of it, and so that you're getting more even. Good, great. That's what I wanted to know, because that kind of caught my attention when you mentioned that.
Yeah, that should help you with that problem.
All right.
Without jeopardizing the actual color too much.
Right.
You may get a slight shade lighter, but not. Yeah. It's not going to be a change the world 4 or 5 shade difference kind of thing.
Right. You're not losing your grain definition, is what I hear you saying.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much. And then I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video to your website. And then also I want to get with you on the E.B. Bradley guys, and we'll leave that down there. And then also make sure you guys go check out their channel because they're posting content. And then you also are pretty active on LinkedIn, and we're pulling him over on the Instagram. So hopefully we're going to see him posting some stuff on Instagram as well.
Well, we're gonna continue to try.
I tell guys all the time, I'm like, I'm slowly pulling all these companies into social media, one company at a time.
It is very true.
So, but hey, I appreciate it. I really like you guys' mindset with the 1K, and I'm really excited to see as you guys keep developing products on the market. I'll be anxious to see you guys kind of grow throughout the U.S. because I definitely think that once people see this stuff and start using it, I think they're going to be really impressed. Because, and I'm just going to, say this because I'm sort of a non-biased individual, but I did look at your 1K versus the Italian stuff, and there's no difference. I can't see a difference. They feel the same. They look the same. I would just say that without adding stuff, yours is going to be more durable. So I feel like that's a win-win for you guys.
Excellent. Well, I guess the Italians they're constantly working hard on their stuff. We're constantly working hard on our stuff. What I've used in the past of theirs, I'm sure they've made improvements, without a doubt. And hey, we're all going in the right direction. We're all trying to make a green product that's usable and that can replace solvent for once and for all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't say that to throw anybody under the bus. That was not the mention of the comment, but just to say that because that seems to be sort of the standard here. And I just want to know that there's other companies out there that are producing, top quality water-based materials. And kind of my goal really with everything I'm doing is just to bring water-based more to the forefront of, technology so that we have more R&D going on with it. And we can get away with the solvents and kind of really put the issue to bed that, water-based is as good as solvent. Because as we're finding, as I'm testing these things, I mean, it has some, unique problems, but companies like you guys that are focused on it, I like pretty much everything that you've said. You guys are hitting all the issues that I've seen with a lot of these products. So I think this is great. So thanks so much for coming on. And I think that we're going to, you guys are nice enough to have your chemists come on. We're going to do a show on that. And I think that'll be a lot of fun and maybe open some people's eyes to, how these things get formulated and the problems and how you deal with them. And so I really appreciate it. And I hope that we can do more together in the future.
All right, Eric, we appreciate your help. Thank you.
All right. Well, hey, guys, we'll catch you next week. And remember, test, don't guess.